Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Three former footballers who say they were abused as youth players are setting up a trust to support other players and families caught up in the sex abuse scandal. Since they went public, hundreds of people have come forward to say they were abused by youth coaches at some of Britain's top clubs. More players have been speaking out today, as our sports editor Dan Rowan reports.
For years, they'd suffered in silence. Today, they presented a united voice. These men, having spoken out about the abuse they'd endured as young footballers, launching a trust to support other victims and making an emotional appeal to the sport to do more.
You think about how many professional footballers there are, and can they please just come ahead and support us and provide the awareness that we require for this. Just think, you know, that could be your child. Every time I look at my child, it's hard work.
The FA has launched an internal review into the scandal, but those representing the victims want more to be done.
It needs a thorough, independent, truly independent investigation. And we're not making any allegations about any professional body at all today, but it may well be the case that there is constructive criticism that comes out of that review about certain establishment bodies.
Today's launch event was here in Manchester because when this all began, the focus was very much on youth football in the northwest of England. But in the last 3 weeks, it's become all too clear that this is now a national scandal. Today, more revelations about Bob Higgins, the former Southampton youth coach named in connection with allegations of child sex abuse in the 1980s and cleared of charges in 1992. This letter shows that in 1989, the Football League warned all its clubs about working with Higgins, saying the sports authorities were opposed to the activities of the coach's academy, but giving no further details. Despite this, Higgins went on to work at a number of clubs and until recently was still a coach at Fleet Town. This man alleges he was a victim of Higgins.
Same thing, touching, and his dressing gown was open and it was horrible. I touching and I was like a board, really.
Higgins is yet to reply to requests for comment and has previously denied wrongdoing. And tonight, the scandal reached Scotland. A former youth football coach and top-flight assistant referee, Hugh Stevenson, accused of a series of child sex offences.
It was about every depraved sexual act that you can think of, up to and including rape, yeah. I was raped dozens of times.
Haynes turned to the Scottish Football Association and met with the late Jim Farry, the then chief executive, but today the governing body admitted it didn't do enough.
I'm sickened as a father, as a director of the Scottish FA. We need to apologise deeply to Peter Haynes for the fact that this matter wasn't taken seriously. The Scottish FA at the time didn't appear to listen and nothing came of it. That's unacceptable.
With hundreds of alleged victims and yet more police forces involved, football's abuse scandal continues to stun the sport. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Manchester.
Now here, former footballers who say they were sexually abused early in their careers have launched a new trust to help victims and their families. Andy Woodward, who was the first player to break his silence over the scandal, says he hopes the authorities will support the new organisation so others do not have to suffer. It comes as the scale of the alleged crimes continues to grow, as our sports editor Steve Scott reports.
The speed with which this scandal is unfolding is astonishing. At the last count, there were 860 calls to the dedicated abuse hotline, linking 55 football clubs to 18 different police forces. Those figures are expected to rise, and behind every number is a life changed forever. Less than 3 weeks after Andy Woodward's bravery burst open the dam of sex abuse in youth football, he and two other former players launched a trust to help all victims and their families.
We all went through a terrible ordeal. We want justice and we want reform. We want to move forward to be able so we can protect those children that are suffering now in all walks of life, never mind football. We want to protect them because we went through it and people are going through it right now.
The Trust's lawyer says not only are abusers still working in football, but he also knows several clubs who've paid out to silence victims.
It's been a tidal wave of victims coming forward, but a number of victims have indicated that they've also been the subject of such confidentiality or gagging clauses.
The latest club to be drawn into the scandal, Fleet Town, who until recently had employed a coach who, when at Southampton, faced multiple allegations of abuse.
Most of the players that were with me at Southampton, they followed me.
Bob Higgins famously coached Alan Shearer, among others. A case against him alleging abuse collapsed in 1992, but it's emerged by then he was on the game's radar. In 1989, the Football League sent a letter to all its clubs carrying a warning about Higgins and his academy. It said, "I would ask all clubs which might be thinking of becoming involved to give this office the opportunity of appraising them of the situation before taking any steps in this direction." One manager who worked alongside Higgins at Southampton was asked to confront him when rumours circulated about his behaviour.
The manager asked me to have a word with him, and which I did, and he got very annoyed and said that he would sue anybody who said anything against him. Jumped up and stormed out.
Football's secret pain is slowly revealing itself, and thanks to men like Andy Woodward, very little will be hidden for much longer. Steve Scott, ITV News.
Now, 3 former footballers who claim they were abused broke down in tears today as they launched a new support group to fight for justice for victims of abuse. The Trust lawyer said that as many as 4 football clubs may have paid off alleged victims of abuse. Our sports correspondent, Kamian Zeram, was there.
I just want to say how proud I am of you guys up there. There's some in the background that should be sat here, and all those people and all members of the public that have given us this support and give us this strength to get through this. And we're going to get through it, and we're one big family, and I can't thank everybody enough. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Just think, you know, that could be your child. Every time I look at my child, it's hard work.
Right, don't worry.
It is still raw. 2 weeks since Andy Woodward waived his anonymity to speak of the sexual abuse he suffered as a child. 30 years since it happened. He, Steve Waters and another player launching a trust to support victims, survivors like them. How many clubs does this already involve? Crewe Alexandra, the club they played for back in the early 90s, has launched an investigation. They called their ordeal heartbreaking, but have yet to say sorry. Crewe's manager at the time, Dario Gradi, won't comment until their review is completed. And it's claimed Chelsea, who secretly paid out money to a victim last year, aren't the only club that may have things to hide. The legal team behind the new trust claimed today they had new information from as yet unnamed players that as many as 4 other clubs may have recently paid off victims of child sexual abuse.
And I think there are other individuals within the game, past and present, where firmer action should and could have been taken.
Nearly 20 years ago, in 1997, Channel 4's Dispatches exposed allegations of sexual abuse of young players. It included claims about a Bob Higgins, a former youth coach who was still active in football until this weekend, when he was sacked by Fleet Town. Higgins had been charged with 6 counts of child abuse in 1992, but he denied the claims and the charges were dropped. Higgins continued coaching, even though clubs were apparently repeatedly warned about him by the Football League, the police and social services. And it is this story that football fears most, that people knew and did nothing.
It's good that it has come out. You know, it's good that this is happening.
As painful as it is.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, if you only see one little kid's life or, you know, helping another adult that's been through it, then it's all worth it, you know.
It is painful, airing traumas that were buried for decades. These players and their families want justice.
Kamian Zeram.